Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Let me just get my notes up so I can. Oh, need my second screen. I don't have it today. All right.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sia. I'm the curator from Mokta, responsible for curating the event. We also have with us Jon Lowenstein and Jedediah Brown, both Jon Lowenstein, the organizer of The Advocate, and Jedediah Brown, one of the main characters of The Advocate, very social community activist in Chicago. So, just to give a little bit of an explanation of the event, we have created this event with two features. One on our website, the Mokta website, which is a rundown of everything that's on everything of the event. So we have Jon Lowenstein's work and a lot of the advocate information is replicated there. And then we also have a Cryptovoxels gallery, which is a virtual exhibition space where you can join and physically walk through the exhibition, seeing the artworks and seeing a lot of the trailers and things from The Advocate. So, just a breakdown of the event tonight. We're going to be having a discussion with Jon and Jedediah, and then a quick curator's tour through the Cryptovoxels gallery. So please feel free to join us there and walk with us as we explore some of the works more in depth. So, brief introductions for both of you guys. Jon Lowenstein is a documentary photographer and filmmaker who specializes in long-term, in-depth investigations into the realities of inequality, justice, and social violence. He is engaged with many communities throughout his project, from his neighbors in Chicago to undocumented Mexican immigrants and their journeys to the United States. Lowenstein is a Ted Singer Fellow and a John Simon Memorial Foundation Guggenheim Fellow in photography, and has won a variety of awards for his work, including the Dorothea Lange, Paul Taylor Prize, and the National Press Photographers Association New America Award. The Advocate is currently a finalist for the Alexia Foundation Grant for World Understanding. Jedediah Brown is a community organizer and activist focused on fighting social injustice in America. He is a former political candidate of Chicago, the Justice National President, and a founder of the Chosen Generation and Young Leaders Alliances. Thank you both for joining me here today. Really appreciate that you took the time. So to kind of begin the discussion with you both, many people seeing this exhibition and seeing this work will never have visited Chicago before. As someone who's made like their home and their friends and their family there, would you guys like explain what Chicago is like?
Jed?
John.
Well, Chicago is, I feel like Chicago is like the most American city. It represents the best and some of the toughest things that go on in America. And it really is a tale of two cities. And so what we see is part of the city is well taken care of, plenty of jobs, services, money, commerce, education, schools are good. And then a good portion of the city is systematically kind of segregated and left behind and has a lot of the things that are taken for granted on the north side, on the south and west sides, frankly, are not available to the residents. And that inequality plays out in so many ways. And I think the powerful thing about this film is that the young men and women in the film, Jedediah being one of them, just say we are not going to accept that modality and that reality as our reality. And they have fought for many, many years to change that in the face of extreme odds. So that's, for me, Chicago is like, it's like a love hate. Like I love Chicago so much. It's like it gives you everything, and at the same time it also breaks your heart. It can break your heart every single day. And so in many ways, Jed's story, it's like kind of a wild story of Jedediah and Lamont and Alita and Will. All the people in the film are, I feel like, a representation of the city in the best ways.
And I think that that's actually a great pictorial of what Chicago was like. However, when you ask a person from Chicago what Chicago was like, it's going to be completely different for everybody
Right.
because it is one of America's most segregated cities. It is a very tough city where people literally form their identity of the city in their own niche of it. And so for us, or where I come from, it's where you find more of the poverty, more of the violence, poor education. It is literally where it is where the outcry is coming out to the Ivy Tower or the City Hall saying, hey, we know that there's other things going on in Chicago. We want to kind of experience some of it too. And we're afraid to venture out of our parts of town because sometimes we literally don't even be welcome. You know, in places like Mount Greenwood, where most of the police live,
Yeah.
or Bridgeview, which is long-standing, has a history of hate crimes against people that are minorities. But on the flip side, you're going to downtown and it feels like this complete paradise of dreams. Huge buildings. That's where all of this great shopping is, great dining. And you can find it pretty much in the wee hours of the night. Transportation is running all the time and you feel safe. So it's going to be different depending on who you talk to. But Chicago is a melting pot of America. You will be made tough. And just like John said, it's a city that you will absolutely love, even when you absolutely hate some of the things that it
Totally.
offers. It's nuts.
And I could say also that Chicago, for me, the thing is the so much of the language about the Black community in Chicago on the South Side and the West Side, people are always been, the segregation means that you're afraid to go. People are afraid to go. They think they're going to get shot. They think that all this stuff is going to happen.
Yeah.
But really, once the community embraces you, it's an embrace that's like an intense, never-ending hug. So it's really real. The thing about Chicago that I love is it's like I think because so many rural people came there from, in the Black community, came from the South, in the Mexican community, a lot of people came from rural, a lot of Polish people. It's a really earthy. It's just an earthy, strong embrace. So that's something that I think a lot of people in the media who join who just come in and like talk about Chicago from the outside don't understand. And I think in the film it comes through very strongly.
Yeah.
And so one of the things about Chicago is you have not seen Chicago until you have visited every single one of the 77 neighborhoods, because
Yeah, that's
every
true.
single one offers something completely unique. And it
Mhm.
is so fascinating because on the north side, even where there's this feeling of safety, there's this feeling of community, you'll come down to the south and we have that in our own form, but we have the same opportunities of a lakefront as they do. We have beaches, we have lakefront, we have major streets that go right to downtown. It is a very complex city that you will not fully understand until you spent an amazing amount of time in each one. So everybody that's coming to Chicago, you got to stay for a while. It's a big city, and you got 77 places to visit.
Can't do it in just one day.
No.
Um, yeah, I think that's actually something that really comes across really strongly in The Advocate as well, like how vibrant the different communities are and how, how individual every person that you kind of interview or talk to or like interact with in a protest. I would kind of love to know a little bit more about like your collaborative process, John, and how you work with these communities so closely over such a long period of time.
Well, when I started, I was a photographer, and I'm still a photographer and a documentary person. But basically, the way I look at it is like you always want to try to give something back and be a part of the scene and be a part of it. So really moving from, in a way, living in Chicago and then moving to the South Side was a big change. And then teaching, I taught. And originally when I worked, and you'll see some of the pictures, was like working with a Polaroid. I was able to give people back an image on the street, which was always a real positive thing. And then with the Advocate, I feel is just the collaborative process has really been an ongoing conversation with everyone in the film, and especially with Jed and with Lamont and everybody in the film. It's really getting them to understand why I'm doing the film and what we're trying to accomplish. Because I think what's really powerful about this group and this generation of activists is that you guys have the tool to tell your own story. And so that tool means that in a lot of ways, they look at, I think, I don't know, you can talk to this, Jed, but a lot of ways, like sometimes I think people just think, oh, well, why do we need Jon around? But I think I bring a little bit of a point of view that's a little different. So it's just been a great, it's just been an amazing experience just hanging out and being able to spend time with these guys and see what they do and how they really speak truth to power on a daily basis when honestly most people aren't listening.
Yeah. I actually think that's a really interesting point as well, because you've kind of been with these communities for decades in some cases, and you've seen the rise of social media kind of come in towards the later end of that. So from the beginning, you've been there with a camera, with a video camera, and being actually able to kind of record it in that way, and then slowly moving into this, social media where everyone kind of also becomes their own photographer or videographer in a way as well. It's really interesting.
And I can say from my perspective, it's completely a different thing. When I used to show up on the block in the early 2000s and late 90s with a camera, it was like, people were just not cool with it. And you had to build a relationship with the community and the young people just to be allowed onto the block with the camera without getting, without people either turning away from you, ignoring you, or just not wanting you there. And so now it's really changed. It's like everybody's telling their own story and shooting their own pictures and Facebook Live and witnessing what's happening. And so my role is changed. And that's where the filming is actually, I think, really important. So I don't know how you see it, Jed, but I've always been impressed with how you tell your story.
Well, I mean, that was your question, Jon. You nailed it. No, but seriously, like I just would like to expound on that though, and that is, Chicago. So the Chicago that people are experiencing now is because of the work that we've done in our young days of advocacy. And what I mean by that is, number one, we became so used to people only coming around when they wanted to use us for something. Yeah. They wanted to use us for the film. They wanted to use us because they were aspiring for something politically. They wanted to use us because they wanted to open a business or something. And so we were used to people coming around to act as if they care, and then they take, and we never see them or hear from them again. A ton of promises. But what happened with people like Jon and what I would call the social media age for us is that literally there is this transitional period in Chicago that I'm so honored to have been a part of, which people like Jon kept showing up in the crisis, and he seemingly stayed. He didn't just get the film, he stayed, or you would see him at the next one, and you would see him at the next one, and he was no longer the strange white guy with the camera. He became one of the people you expect to see when there's a trauma or a tragedy that ultimately will affect the city. And so then he took it a step further. He also talked to us after filming. And so I remember Jon saying, hey, man, I just want to kind of follow you around. And it's like, well, why? Nobody wants to follow me around. Or what do you want? What's this guy want to take from me now? But Jon presented himself more so as a part of the community. And then he took it a step further when everybody started to find out, oh, wait, he lives on the south side of Chicago? He lives here? And so he literally made himself a part of the community. But at the same time, social media was becoming more prevalent, and more people were starting to not necessarily get their information from the news. They were getting their information from the fight and from the video of the phone. And so it became a norm. It went from we don't want cameras around to we know that there are advocates who are at every single issue and camera people who are documenting it to give us our own voice. And they're putting a narrative that I can relate to. It's on the ground. It's in real time. It's not a snippet. It's raw. And the entire city started to it became a part of the culture. So now you normally would have gone to a crime scene and you would have had a hostile introduction. But now it's kind of like, we know what the advocates do. Let them film it. It's kind of welcome now. And we created that.
Yeah, and that is such an amazing change because, people, like, I think that's a powerful statement that people were so used to, being taken from, and this tool that, I mean, it cuts both ways at times, and I know you can probably speak to that, Jed, and we really speak to that in the film as we're editing it. But the tool that can bring you this amazing outlet, also people can come and attack you. But it's amazing, like, what's happened and the change. I mean, some days I'm like, wow, and some days I get frustrated because I think it's made me have to communicate even more clearly why my presence is needed, and showing up time and again, just like these guys do. I mean, I think that's half the battle, is just getting back into the fight every day, or every time you're ready to go to battle. It's like, some days that it's going to be hard, and just getting out there is half the battle. Showing up, and I think Jed says that a lot. He's like, we just, you said that a lot, Jed, was with just, hey, we just the thing that's different is we just continue to show up, and that's what it is, showing up for people who nobody else is going to show up for. And so in places, I think what a lot of people don't understand about what's going on is it's not just the murders and killing. It's like these guys show up for all different things. Elite is showing up for people who don't have food. Will is basically, confronting and investigating the police, finding ways to get, videos and the Laquan McDonald video out, and doing all for all these young people. Jed's just showing up and just getting in your face about whatever it is that needs to happen. Lamont, he's just like the kid brother who just refuses. He's just like a wide-eyed kid, man, and just does this amazing stuff. So when I showed up when I was following the Laquan McDonald protest, actually when I met Jedediah was the first day I met him. There were some flashing blue lights at the corner of 71st and Jeffrey, which is right near my house. And I thought, okay, well, maybe there's a sort of something I should go investigate. And I got there, and there's about 250 people on a Thursday afternoon or a Tuesday afternoon with these coffins on wheels. And there was a kind of bald-headed dude in the middle of the street, with a megaphone. And I'm like, who is this guy? What's going on? Because it was like a Tuesday afternoon. Marches were usually Saturdays, Fridays, whatever. But he had organized a big, big march. And that's the first time I met you, bro. And I was like, so after that, I was like, whoa, what's going on? So it's really interesting that we walked around the whole neighborhood and people were waving and really, the violence is deeply personal. When in the community, people are killing people they know. Sometimes it's family, it's people you grew up with. It's crazy how deeply that scars the community. And so the fact that, and that's not even talking about the police violence. So, oh no, I think the story, the humanize the behind the scenes of what you guys go through has been the thing that I want to understand the most, and that I think people need to understand, because people just thought, like George Floyd, this stuff just happened. Didn't happen just out of the blue. It happened from a lot of hard work over many, many years all over the country. This is a story that happens all over the world too. We're seeing this in Nigeria right now, right, with the SARS protest. There's activists there who've been laying the groundwork for that. So
yeah, and I think, you began this project in, like, after the Trump election in 2016, and it's a lot obviously has changed in the movement since then, especially now with earlier this year, the 2020 George Floyd protests and things. Like, how have you seen this project change over the years and develop with all of these new events that have been happening around?
Jed,
Yeah.
do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm very excited about this project for a number of reasons. And I'm just kind of like in a reflective state, listening to even Jon talk about the day we met officially. Now, the biggest thing that I want to pull out of why I'm so grateful to be a part of this project is because oftentimes you see about the big headline issue. You hear about Trump running for president. You hear about George Floyd losing his life. You hear about Breonna Taylor losing her life. You hear about all of the injustices and inequalities that's going on, or the fact that Laquan McDonald was shot so many times by a Chicago police officer. You see the big headline, but what oftentimes isn't seen is the lives that it affects and how it affects their lives. Every single one of us that have become advocates because something happened in this country that we could not ignore. And the moment we responded to it, our lives was never able to go back to being normal. As well as oftentimes we're fighting for someone else to have a voice, even though we sometimes don't have our own. And there's a cost that you pay every time you show up, especially for a larger populace that don't understand you doing that, because it doesn't necessarily seem normal. Until recently in America, it just seems like if a flag is swatted, everybody's going to protest. However, it's not always been like that, but there are real lives that are impacted. There are real sacrifices that are made. There's a real effect to being an advocate. And so when I look at what has happened in this country since some of the things that I've advocated for, including fighting, I didn't want Donald Trump to become the president of the United States. I didn't want that, me personally. I didn't like his policies. I didn't like his presentation. But when I look today and I look at him not winning, well, according to him, it ain't over. So let's not talk too soon, right? But when I look at Donald Trump's presidency versus how it started, there's a lot of things that comes across my mind. One of the things that come across my mind is that this is a resilient nation full of amazing and strong people, because we survived it. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I think about all the people who day in and day out gave of themselves, their time and energy and their resource in the background to make this possible.
Yeah.
And how we may never know their story, or if we know some of their story, we'll never know the fullness of it. So it's not just Donald Trump loses the election. It's Donald Trump is going to be transitioning out. And for the last 4 years during his presidency, it has affected individual lives in ways that we may never imagine. But in this instance, I am so fortunate. Will is so fortunate. The leader is so fortunate. Lamont is so fortunate that somebody actually cared to not only see the headline, but to see its effect in the background and the fight that is required. And so the change is that I believe something is happening that I've always wanted to happen. And that's that people realize that advocates are not real titles. It's called residents. And every resident has a duty to advocate for a better quality of life where they live. And you see a consciousness rising amongst a world that is now people saying there's something is happening that you are not satisfied with. You don't settle, you speak up, you organize, you contribute, you advocate, you be a resident. I love it.
Yeah, no, and that's such a great summary of this thing, because honestly, it's amazing, because like when I first saw these guys, met them, it's like the growth, even in the time, like I'm watching the growth in them, in each one of them, even to the point of when we filmed Jedediah in the aftermath of George Floyd. It was like you came to that moment and you filmed yourself, bro. Like the person you were coming to that battle was more confident, more secure, and more ready to, I don't know, like coming on 71st Street, because 71st Street, right near where we met 6 years before that, was kind of on the precipice of blowing up. And you talk the young men and women down in the midst of one of the tensest times in our country, in our lives, from damaging their own neighborhood further. In that moment, we see, and you'll see it in the film, because that moment you see a maturity that was an ability to speak what Will and Jed were ability to speak to the people that just, their own community. That was very powerful. So these things, I think what you said was great, man.
Yeah. And, all of the different people in this project, Jedediah Brown, Will Calloway, Alida Clark, Lamont Record, like every one of those individuals has a very distinct and unique style of activism, of residency in a way. And like, what was it about these? I mean, it's true, yeah. Like, what was it about these people that really like struck you as individuals that made you feel like you needed to follow them specifically?
Like, okay, so this started because I did a story with Ben Austin about Jedediah. And so while we were doing the story, I was photographing him, and Ben wrote this amazing profile of Jed after spending months just talking with him and hanging out with him and going to these different events. And I read the story and I was photographing Jed and I was witnessing what was going on in his life and just in that moment, which was the aftermath of really one of the most difficult periods of his life. And I said to him, I said, man, there's no way we're going to be able to tell the story in photographs. I mean, I was like, I could photograph for 10 years and it wouldn't get to the heart of what is going on, of the Facebook and the day to day. And I was already tried to make I made some short films, but I was like, I just got to I said to him one day, I was like, dude, we got to just continue. I want to make a film. And so we started, and I don't think either of us knew exactly what that would entail, but it was really powerful. So Jed, that's where it started. And then naturally, frankly, when we went to the Kanika Jenkins protests, the people who showed up were really Will, Jed, Alida. The first day that they were there, it was Will, Jed, Alida, and Lamont. And I just kept on intersecting with these four kind of characters, I say, naturally. I met Lamont in 2015 when he was protesting for Laquan McDonald, and he became, I think, world known because he naturally went up to the cops and went into their face like 2 inches away from the cops. And I was looking at it, I was like, who is this kid? Like, he had these twisties, hair was all twisted up, and he was going up to the cops like 2 inches away from their face and confronting them with his presence in a way that was like, they didn't know what to do. It was so personal and nobody else was doing it. And I was like, I'd never seen anything like it. And so what I want to say is like the creativity that you guys bring to this has always amazed me, because it's like, whatever problem is, it's like you have to think of a creative way to deal with it. And I talked to Lamont the other day at length. We had this really long interview, and he was talking about that. And he's like, that just came totally out of some place that he didn't even know where it came from. It was just him. And that's the whole thing. Like, each one of these guys, and there's just, when they call this a leaderful generation, a leaderful movement, there's no MLK, there's no Malcolm X. This generation is just, like Jed says, residents, just a bunch of young people. People just were like, hey, man, this is going on. I don't like it. I'm going to go tell you why I don't like it. And I'm going to try to figure out a creative way to change it. And I loved that. And for me, like, I'd spent 10 years and more kind of looking at the conditions of what was happening in the neighborhood, and it was like, man, it was just depressing. I needed something more positive, man. And these guys are just positive, man. They're just out there doing it,
And I'm laughing because there's like, so first of all, there's this question that someone asked me that I really love. They say, what wouldn't you do to protect those and what you love? What wouldn't you do? And I'm just laughing because I remember that day when I first seen Lamont staring at the cop, and the only thing I can think in my mind is, we're gonna die. For surely they're going to kill us. He didn't cross the line. We're gonna die. And I was like, tell him, just get ready. We're gonna die today. But when when you are in these spaces of advocating where it's this first responding type confrontational thing where you don't get the plan, it's so funny because we've done such outrageous things that we'll be like, oh my God, that was crazy. And like, where did that come from? And we all be like, I don't know. I just did. Did you not think about that? No, I saw it and I did. I grabbed chains to put on the police department. Who thinks of that? I'm arresting all the cops. Huh? And so, these moments are organic and it's literally us out there with sometimes nothing but ourselves and saying, look, we got to use whatever we got. We're improvising our fight, but it's like these moments that history remembers and we just kind of like, and we all like, what was that? Even we're thinking like, that was crazy. And it's kind of funny to me.
And that, it's so funny because it's one of those things where when you're in the middle of it, you just, I don't know. It's fun, like it's hard, but there's a lot of fun, intense, fun moments. Like there's a fellowship, and I think that's one thing that you four bring, sort of a belief in God or belief in, Christianity. I don't know exactly what, but that drives us. These four there's definitely a part of it. For me, I also didn't want to do a story about an organization. Like I did not want to do, there's this amazing movie called The Interrupters. It was an incredible movie about ceasefire and it was great. It was an amazing movie. I wanted to make a movie. I was seeing people who had no direct affiliation coming together organically in the neighborhood where I lived and fighting for a better world. And for me, after witnessing so many years in which, frankly, the powers that be did not listen, and you would go to protests. I mean, I remember the first police killing I went to in 2003, and I got out of my photo club. I was taught this thing called the Wild Photographers Club that I taught. I was working at a school at the time. And we got out of the class, and there was like people like, oh, they killed this dude over in Sircon, which is a neighborhood right nearby. And the whole neighborhood basically marched right from 71st in Dorchester to the 3rd District Police Station. I could tell you, and they reported that the police had gone into the school security camera and taken the tape. And everybody was upset because they had done that. They marched, everybody yelled, everybody screamed. Maybe some TV. I don't even think any television showed up. And some people got arrested. Some of my former students got arrested, and that was it. And that kid got killed, and nothing happened to the police. Flash forward, 14 years or 12 years, and the tools were different. And, you had the Laquan McDonald case, which these guys were elemental in bringing justice for once to the city. So that's a very big difference. But I didn't want that to, after that, I was like, man, this stuff is still happening. It's happening every day. So we have to continue to show it. And I feel like the background of what that takes is a lesson, not just for people in Chicago, it's a people for active advocates for everybody to learn from, so people can take these lessons that are going on with these guys and they can be inspired all over the world, I believe. And that's the way I feel. And that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of coming off of the idea of, recording things and making things permanent experiences that people have had and these things, I was really curious as to why you decided to start archiving your work on the blockchain as well. This is obviously a very permanent technology and things like that, but what was your kind of decision to embrace this digital technology in that way?
Well, Karen Ng, who's my dear friend from TED, from the TED Fellows program, and she was like, "Oh, you got to check out this new thing," you know. And I was like, I knew about Bitcoin and all this stuff, but I didn't know how there was actually, you know, art going on in that space. So I was like, let me try it. And I like the aspect that it's basically once you put into the blockchain, it's really hard to erase. So basically these moments that I photographed or I videotaped will kind of be permanently and put into the chain. What I do think, and I know we haven't talked about this, Jed, but one of the things that I think that's so, I don't think anybody's really thinking about this, but the Facebook Lives that you guys are doing, you know, they can be erased at any moment. I mean, we've downloaded
Yeah.
all yours, Jed, so yours are archived now. But
Praise God.
but you know, Jed always told me that he thought about the Facebook Lives that he does as, in a sense, an archive, and in case anything happens to him, that people will know that what he thought or whatever. And I think that's really amazing. And imagine if we had like in the '60s, we had the, you know, we have the writings from MLK. You know, that he was like a erudite, incredibly, you know, he wrote and he was an amazingly scholarly person. But we don't, you know, letters from Birmingham jail and all this stuff. That was his form. But with these guys, it's a little different, you know. So we have to think about how we're going to archive this. And I don't think anybody is. So I started to think about how are we going to do that. And I think the blockchain would be an amazing way to do it.
Yeah,
I just don't have the money to put on the blockchain. You know, it's expensive to burn them in to the blockchain. But it's super amazing because that's history that can just be erased at any moment. And we have to really think about that.
Yeah. And like Jed as well, you know, this idea of having all of your Facebook lives archived in this way, is how important is it for you to have like how do you pre-plan these Facebook lives? Are they very stream of consciousness? Like how much are you thinking about having this be an archive
Yeah,
when you're making them?
it's all organic. None of it is really planned. To be honest, I could use a little bit more planning in my life because I'm a passion-driven person, a mission-driven person. It's literally what's in the moment. But to have this done, especially with the changes that have happened in my life since being like a mainstream advocate, I'm like even swelled with emotions because like I said, this is a honor that many people, many people deserve this honor, and even some way more than me, but to have it is such a humbling thing because even as Jon was getting ready to go into some moments like what happened on 71st and trying to really convince young men not to destroy the neighborhood, that will be lost. That may not be known. That may not have been understood if I didn't have someone who actually helped me to capture it. And so it's humbling, but it's also earth-shattering too, to know like really I was really trying like that. You know, to see yourself do these things sometimes because it's so much bigger than you and so out of body at times. It's like, was that really me? It's like it's fascinating. But it is also I would say a point of accountability. And the reason why I say that is because it kind of inspires me to never believe in mediocrity or the fact that I'm stuck with just what I was given. And that's something that I really hope is extracted from this, because life is we're all ordinary people, but we can do extraordinary things when we literally apply ourselves and put our mind to it. So many people live mundane lives in existence because they don't press beyond what they feel are their limitations. Those are not limitations. Oftentimes those are those, that's plexiglass. You can break through that and there's so much more life on the other side. And so to have this captured and to have transitioned to this more entrepreneur life when there's more of my time, but miss a purposeful life, it's just a reminder that at any time I want this life to use me in a greater sense, I could just step out of my box and my limitations and I can become who I need to be, just like everybody else can.
Yeah, and that's really one of the things that I always found. I think that's an important message in the film is like, just because something is the world is the way it is doesn't mean you have to accept that the world is that way. And I think, the lives we lose because we're like, for me, like I started this film following some young men who were gang members who had been gang members and were in the streets. And I followed this guy for about 3 months around the same time I was following Jed. I love him to death, but I couldn't find a way. I couldn't find a way to make that story that people could understand that he was trying to change his life too. He just didn't have the same tools to change his life in the same fashion. So when Jeddah died, and it was almost too bleak. It was like I didn't want to make a movie that was just too dark. And when we started talking, I was like, these guys were changing the world. And I was like, man, they believe that we could change Chicago, which is like, I just seen Chicago kind of get increasingly tough, And so it was just, for me, it was also like, okay, good. This is hopeful, man. We're like moving. We believe in something better. And so I like that, for me, I needed that too. Because it can be really depressing sometimes to just, have this kind of pain that you can't alleviate, really,
And we didn't have a desire. I'm sorry, John, my bad.
No, that's it. That's it.
No, so we didn't have a desire to. We weren't trying to become known or famous or anything like that. We were just trying to address crisis, and it's so crazy because literally our faces and our work and our lives literally were being viewed from across the world. We would be getting messages literally from across the waters, people in other countries saying, I'm inspired and I want to do this and do that. And looking at some of the videos and some of the film that has been captured and that has been archived, it's like these are not normal spaces. And it took for me to literally travel the country to realize the world is not this as segregated as Chicago. I thought everywhere was like that. I thought all dogs were vicious. And I think I shared with John one time. I went out of town and I saw something that I never really understood what it was. I thought a dog park was just the name of the park, but it's literally a park for dogs. And all of these dogs come in this park and they're playing and people are in there. Well, on my side of town in Chicago, don't nobody go in no yard and play with random dogs that we don't know and random people. I'm looking at why aren't the dogs attacking? Because our dogs, John, you're making me laugh. Our dogs are more so taught to protect home and to, guard from intruders. And I'm sure that those happen in other places. But to see the archiving, another reason why I appreciate it is because it really gives me an appreciation for the strength I believe God gave us to live life through some of these places. But at the same time, it just shows me how our lives are not advocating space is not in normal in the way we've had to do it. Is not typical. It's not typical.
And it's a great point because a lot of people ask me like, why is this your story to tell? Why are you're a white dude, why are you telling this story? And to me, I mean, there's the issues of identity and race, and I understand that, and power and equality, all that stuff. But to me, it was always just like, this is our country. And just like those guys show up, I want to show up and do what I can to make it a better place and to try to bring some light and understanding to this. And to me, like in Chicago, like I don't understand, and I don't think I ever will, how you can know that people are getting shot down the street like literally like dogs and people getting killed every single day and you're not motivated to do something, whatever your skill set is. And that's what I love about what these guys, this crew and all the young people all over the country who believe in change and believe in a better world are doing, and young, old, whatever, everybody. And So for me, that's where it comes from, a deep motivation of seeing suffering and injustice. And that's what, it's not like it's abstract. It's literally you're walking out your door and people are getting killed, like murdered, shot in the head, dropped on the street. I mean, this happens every single day. You're seeing people who have so much creativity and talent being killed every single. I mean, this is just, to me. Why are we accepting this? And that's just the most extreme part of it. In terms of housing, healthcare, education, all the things that we accept, that there's this just deep structural inequality in the United States, plays out in people's lives, that they can't partake in the full richness of life in some form or fashion that we should be able to. So I don't accept that we should allow that, or that and that's why I believe in these guys. This crew.
And I want to speak to that, if I may. I'm sorry, was you about to ask another question?
Yeah.
No.
I just want to speak to something he said that I think is so powerful. He said, "Why is it his story to tell?" Something about this process has revolutionarily changed me, and it's kind of is a multifaceted thing. But this, I'll try to make it make sense. I kind of learned that every problem creates a new opportunity for greater relationship building. In every culture, every education class, every economic class, everybody has a different type of problem.
Yeah.
But I've also learned that, and I've also been preaching forever, that whatever problems you can see are the ones that you are a potential solution for. Because some things you'll see will move you more than other things you'll see. And so John came into, again, a place where segregation rules the day, where there's a very huge distrust factor, where we're used to being robbed or exploited. And so John came in, this white man with a video camera, who he kind of just thrust himself in. But this is the beauty of it for me. I'm literally fighting against systematic oppression, and one of the ways by which I have to do this is to say how much white people have privilege when I'm speaking truth to power. But I'm standing next to a white man with a camera. I'm like, why he won't just clock me with it? Just hit me with the camera. But he's filming it, and he's listening, and he's conversing, and he's having dinner, and he's coming over the house. So something happened by which one time John said, "I don't feel well." And I found myself as a black man who feels like white people have all this privilege, praying for John to be better, or to be happy that he's getting married, or to be happy that he's getting, that he's having a child, or to have a different cameraman who he put into my life, bring me all the supplies I need to survive the coronavirus. And it's like, why is it the story to tell? Is because as a black man, I have a set of problems that must be resolved. But the people who can see the problems and that recognize that they are potential part of the solution really make the bigger story more beautiful, because now I look at white people with less hostility, because I seen a white man who saw me express myself, who didn't hate me for it, but that also was there to help me heal. Not only did it help me heal in my moment that I'm advocating for, but it helped me heal my vision as it relates to race relations. And I can travel the country more, and I can see white people and feel less offended or less scared or less hostile because I got a reference. But guess what? If I didn't have my problem of violence, I would have never had the story of meeting John.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's deep, bro. Yeah, man. Well, hopefully we're all learning from each other, and humanity is just, I don't know, we got to get past this kind of hate that we have. So that's powerful.
Why I feel like deep, this project is just so, it's poignant in a lot of different ways. But
we still have to finish it, so there's a long, long way to go. But it has been a journey, man. It's been the journey is the destination,
But I would love to flip over to the Crypto Voxels gallery to just do a brief gallery tour for everyone. So the Crypto Voxels gallery is a virtual exhibition space that is built on the Ethereum blockchain. So we've loaded in a lot of Jon's work, both for the Advocate and for his previous work, like documentary films that he's produced and the South Side, which he has been doing for a decade or more. So yes, we are seeing on screen now us in the live stream, and then also the rest of the gallery, which is disorienting, but it's fine. So
this
yeah,
is amazing, bro. Whoever that is, be careful. I just saw them jump off the second floor to the first. You gotta be careful. Don't injure yourself.
You can fly in this place, man. That's
you can fly. Cool. You can move around. It's a full virtual city of galleries, but this one is the Ocular Delusion Gallery. It's actually the grand opening of this gallery, so we're the first exhibition inside it. Thank you so much for allowing us into the space. So as we're looking around here, we're seeing the Advocate trailer, which if you're interested in clicking and viewing through it, you can, stand in front of it with your little Crypto Voxels icon, click it, and it will play for you just a little bit more about this project specifically. So on the back wall, we also have the exhibition text for it, just explaining a little bit more about the project, about Jon's use of blockchain in this technology, and about the Advocate, where it is currently and what you can do to help. So if we move to the left into the South Side little gallery, we have a selection of works from the South Side project. And this is a project that is, a decade long, possibly like more, where Jon has been recording the lives of individuals and his neighbors on the South Side by collecting both photographs, taking them himself, and also a lot of ephemera and other interviews and things, just kind of having a holistic documentation of this neighborhood that he loves and is part of so closely. So, maybe
this thing right here is really a powerful piece of ephemera. This is from the India Martin. It relates to the film in that Lamont, and he explained this the other day. He's not on the thing today. Go down a little bit. Go down. There. This particular little piece of paper basically was like what someone had put at the shrine, and it had blown away into the abandoned lot. And this young woman was murdered, and she was Lamont's best friend, and they were in school together. And that's what got that. Her murder got Lamont completely activated to help change his community. And so, I don't know, we don't have much text there, but the RIP for India, really, I found that and I was like, man, that's just so, I went to that, I photographed that and the aftermath of it. And it was like just heartbreaking because she had been killed over some dispute about a boy, I believe. And the gun had actually jammed. And I believe it was the uncle who unjammed it and gave it back to the girl who killed her. Oh, and so it wasn't just the girl, it was like the community killing itself. And Lamont, that was his partner in crime from school. And he talked about that. So, the fact that it's there is really deep. And the photographs are just pieces of time I made with Polaroid, and this is a found ephemera. I just love that because this was a photo album that was discarded in a thrift shop on 91st and Commercial around there, and there was like 20 of them, and I got them, and I was just like, I just love it's just family, it's like it tells us so much, but I don't know who the people are. So if anybody knows who they are, they can get their family album back. But I just love I love those pictures, and I love the way people are using the photographs to
And
document their own joy.
there were other photographs in this as well, but I just felt like this one was such a, it's, you can tell someone arranged it so lovingly and carefully and
Yeah.
collected all of these different, someone in a, uniform and maybe a graduation photo in the bottom left. It's just like pivotal
Santa,
moments for these people where, they become like a record, not just of like those people, but like the greater, like the person who loved them enough to put them in this. It's really beautiful. And then we're moving around, more photos from the south side on the back wall as well. Maybe you can speak to both of these photos if you're.
The bottom one is a gun buyback, where the city, the police, every year they do a gun buyback program. They buy all these guns and then they lay them out as it's like, hey, we got all these guns, and there's Glenn on the right, bro. And it's really that's interesting to me. I just thought it was really interesting because it's like, here's all these guns, and then the officials who are sort of trying to ostensibly stem the violence, but are ultimately just a part of it, right? Like, we're all just a part of this. And then the photograph above, I love because it's that's Beauty Turner's nephew. And Beauty Turner was this amazing activist who fought for public housing, and she was what she called herself, a writer and a fighter. And that's her nephew, Thunder. And Thunder is like, that was his wedding, so I photographed the wedding. And I love that because, I mean, I don't think they're together anymore, but I love the picture. And Thunder, at that point, Beauty had passed. She passed shortly before. She saw Barack win, but she didn't see him get into office. And I always felt that was a real tragedy, because she told me that, yeah, I know Barack, I believe in Barack, but I'm going to hold his feet to the fire no matter what. And just because he's president doesn't mean anything, because she believed fully in the power of journalism. So, Thunder's wedding was real cool. And Jed says at one point to me, he said, I've seen more funerals and murders than weddings. So but I just like that, the weddings are there too, because it's not all violence and everything. It's just, it's so much good stuff going on too. So, it's important to highlight that,
Absolutely. Moving over to the opposite wall, we have in the corner there, the entranceway, the documentary that you produced about Ferguson, when the protests were happening as well. So this was years, I believe, before you started working on The Advocate, but it really just shows a trajectory of like being involved, at these momentous places and occasions. So,
and Ferguson for me was like the moment where I realized, like, there's a new generation, and I'm not connecting to them. So it's fitting that's in this, because it really made me realize, like, when I was on the streets in Ferguson, I saw these young people who were activating, and it was so fascinating because it started right in the hood, like right in that little hood, and they burned the QT that night, the Quick Trip, I believe. I wasn't there yet, but that came from the local community sticking up for Mike Brown. And then that grew out into this incredible like thing that just took on a life of its own for over a year and a half, right? And but what I realized when I was on the street there, I was like, granted, I was in another city, I was in another town, in another state, but I realized that there was a new generation that was coming up, and it was not going to be the same world that I had been witnessing the 10 or 15 years prior. That this generation wasn't taking it the same way, the injustice. And that film really, I wasn't able to coalesce everything. I like it a lot because it was this moment, but it taught me, and I think it laid the foundation for this film, frankly, because I kept on asking that question. Who are these kids, man? Who are these young people? To me, they were kids, you know? And that kid right there, he says, I'm Mike Brown. I'm Mike Brown. You know, he and that's the whole thing. You know, it's like in Laquan McDonald, you know, Will sees himself in Laquan McDonald, you know. Everybody saw their little sister in Kanika Jenkins, you know, everybody. And so for me, it was just like, man, I had to learn something and I just had to explore it. And that's where the seeds of this film, I believe, were sown. So that's cool.
Right. So moving around now, as we head up to the second floor, I'd love to just flag the fact that we would love to have some audience questions after this touring around the second floor. So please feel free to drop them in the chat wherever you are. And maybe Serena or one of our other moderators would be able to kind of see that. Yeah, sorry.
I have a question for Jed. What did you think when you saw Ferguson, man? We never talked about that, but what did you think that happened?
You said, what did I think? What happened?
Well, yeah, what did you think about what happened in the protests in Ferguson, and how did that affect you? How did that affect you?
I mean, to be honest, it just kind of, I don't know if you remember what I would tell you. What I would always say is that I believe that basically the narrative in protest is changing, and it's going to become more volatile because more people are starting to speak up, but there's less systematic changes that are happening. There's less. We weren't seeing justices being done, and then things moving a little slower. So Ferguson, for me, because it had turned very violent and volatile at one point, was just an indication that protesting, the DNA, the dynamics of it was changing, was shifting. And so, and I knew that it would become worse and worse each time, to the point where now, when there's something that happens, literally there's a concern of looting and rioting and boarding of businesses. But that stuff began to happen because of unaddressed concerns of citizens and unrest. And Ferguson was one of those turning points in this country. I wanted to be a part of Ferguson, but I didn't go because I wasn't sure that it was right for me to be there, because it was also out of my city.
Yeah, and that's really in the film. You see, that's a really important point. I think, you know, when you should be somewhere is a question that I think a lot of these guys ask, and I think we all need to ask ourselves, because sometimes, you know, the photographers go to a place because, you know, oh, I'm going to make some good pictures, but I've never looked at it that way. I've looked at it like, I just get a feeling like, should I be there or not? Like, it's a feeling of like, and Ferguson was one of those ones where I was like, man, I just felt like I need to be there. I need to see what's going on the ground. And it definitely was an important change moment in our country. And nothing, I think, was the same right at, you know, after that. Yeah. But yeah, this is can we go back to that picture? No, the other one, the one of so
This one?
So this is the Kanika Jenkins, and Kanika Jenkins is one of those cases that I felt is so interesting, because it was a case of a young woman who died from mysterious causes in a hotel freezer. And the thing about it was, the young woman went to a party and then she wandered around, and then they found her dead in the freezer. But the mom had gone up to the hotel early in the morning, a few hours after the disappearance, and said, my daughter's in the hotel. Can you help me look for her? Can we look on the videotapes? And they said, no, she's not here. You have to call the police, file a missing persons report. If they had done that and they had listened to her, Kanika Jenkins might be alive today. We don't know. But that was a really, I mean, it's like, this was not a high profile murder. This was not a it was just one of those moments where people come together because they see themselves in a young woman. And this in this part of the film is a really hard struggle because it didn't end well. Nothing ended well with Kanika Jenkins. It wasn't a simple ending like, oh, we got justice. No, it was a hard, and you'll see in the film. I can't give it all away, or you can go on the lives and see. But it it was a really powerful moment where people are showing up for each other, and it's just hard. It just shows how hard it is to show up, to go to jail. What they call jail chronicles every night. Go to jail to bail people out and show up for a family who doesn't feel that they're being represented always with the best interest, and the personal attacks on people. And so it shows the complexity and kind of the difficulty of it. And I think that of advocating. And so uh, I would, we were there for almost a month, I think, at the Rosemont Hotel, at this hotel and right near O'Hare Airport. And the whole protest kind of blew up in the end, but it still is a powerful, powerful message to me about how sometimes you just fight because you believe you can make something better, but it doesn't always come out exactly the way you believe it's going to go.
Yeah.
So,
was there a reason, Jed, that you felt like you really needed to get involved in this protest as well?
I think that the Kanika Jenkins protest grappled the hearts and the imaginations of every individual who's seen it, because here was this young black girl who's gone, and this narrative literally makes no sense especially to a larger populace who can't or won't consider science, but at the same time that don't know science, but science could potentially say, but then also with all of the factors of a normal encounter or normal partying environment, or wandering through these halls and this eerie nature. I think that many people saw Kanika as the little sister on the block, and including myself, and parents saw them as, oh wait, this could be my daughter. But then there was this more personal effect where people said, well, dang, what if this was me and my friends? And it made people start to consider their friendship. And I think that I literally considered and pondered every one of those aspects when I went there. But most importantly, like, wait a minute, there's this young black girl who is like the neighborhood girl, neighborhood homie, little sister, and I don't feel like the system has proven to care enough that they're going to truly fight to get true justice, and we must be there to keep pressure, because the narrative makes no sense. Her wandering into a freezer that is supposed to be inoperable and dies. No way, Jose.
Yeah, and it was the people, it resonated with people all over the country. What was crazy, because there were kids who were acting out the Kanika Jenkins case in their schools. And so, it's a funny thing because it's sort of one of these protests that almost became massive, but it was just, you'll see in the film when we get to, you see, it's crazy.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, John. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's it.
No, and I definitely want to give a shout out to my Justice family, to which some of them I see are in the comments of this feed. Justice family was literally made possible because of the Kanika Jenkins fight. And one of the things that kept me in the Kanika Jenkins fight is because people literally all over the world were vested and committed and fighting together. This case brought us together in ways we never imagined. It was literally like the Emmett Till case of our day, of our generation, and I hold no regrets in choosing to fight. And I think that, to be honest, I don't think that fight is over. I just think it's just different.
Yeah, it's kind of in the background. It's kind of things are continuing. So, but yeah, it's this is the teaser. The latest teaser.
This in front of us is the teaser. Just a note as well for all of the. So this is the teaser trailer for The Advocate. So if you want to see a little bit of the actual film, here you can. But Also, for everyone who is visiting the gallery, all of the works on the top floor are for sale. So if you are interested in supporting the project yourself, you're able to kind of purchase those, and that money will go to help editing and completing the project and sending it out. So that is something that is an option. And so just a few audience questions. I know we're slightly over time, but I wanted to kind of address them. This one is for Jon. What are the challenges of shooting this project?
Well, the biggest challenge for me is just trying to keep up with these guys, man. They're living life.
Move fast.
I think the hardest thing for me has been a little bit that getting everybody to understand why it's going to be important to tell this story and to include me fully in the process. And that's been, I think Jed kind of understood that from the beginning, and we go back and forth on what should be in the film and what pieces he wants to share of his life. But it's pretty wild because people tell their story in the time that they feel comfortable with you to reveal their true nature and their true story. And so just funny because I was back in Chicago. I was there recently, just working, and I spoke with Lamont. I was like, I'm around. He was around. And finally he sat down with me and really told me a story about his life. And it's like we had talked, but like we hadn't talked like that. And same with Jed. Like he showed up a few weeks ago. We talked some more, and just I think the time that you put in makes a difference. But the challenge is just I mean, it's a hard story, man. These guys are. It's deeply personal. It's deeply personal, and they're in many ways these guys are everybody's a public figures by being activists. So revealing the personal traumas, and what that means for them and what the cost is. That's not something that everybody wants to put on display. I mean, it's not something that you're super excited about to display all the time. But that's the thing about Jed. I think Jed, you kind of are willing to step into the fray in a way that on a lot of different levels that is interesting. And at the same time, Jed is pretty guarded, I mean, I think you're guarded sometimes. You're like, hey, we'll talk about things and about what's going to be what we're going to talk about in the film and he's like, well, why do you want to show that? And I'll have to explain it. And that's the thing. It's a negotiation with people when people think like journalism and documentary is just like, oh, you show up and then you just take the pictures. And it's like, sometimes it is, but most of the time you have to explain to people why you're there and why you want to do this particular, be at that particular scene or be let in further to someone's life, because it's all about trust. That's hard. So that's probably the biggest challenge for me. Just making sure that I can communicate that effectively.
Yeah. Jed, we also have a question for you. And this one is, how do you reach someone who doesn't want to listen?
Oh, wow.
That's a question for me.
Yes, question for you.
How do you reach someone who doesn't want to listen? I think that if it's that important of a message, then you actually have to now get invested to figure out why they don't want to listen. Because a person cannot hear beyond offense or desire. And there are different ways of listening. There's a listening to rebuttal and listening to understand. So if you have a person who is not wanting to listen, then the focus becomes why. And sometimes it could be because they don't have a relationship with you. There could be an offense that needs to be addressed. They're a myriad of it. There's a lot of reasons. And so sometimes I think that the best way to get them to listen is to just be available and to be consistent and to figure it out until they're ready, and don't be mad at them. Be patient with them while you're trying to help them to hear it if it's really that important.
Yeah.
That was like a master's class. That had that question was a floozy. I'm gonna charge you next time. That was good
Yeah.
advice.
Only hard questions now on.
And I was like, wait, what? Okay, I answered it.
Yeah. We have another question for you both, and that is which protest event, this one is to Jon, but I think I'd love to open that up to you as well, Jed. Which protest event were you with Jed in, and what was the most memorable and why? And I feel like, Jed, if you want to chime in as well on your most memorable protest, that portion of it.
That's a good question. Boy, that's a lot. I would say that probably the most memorable are is either when probably the Kanika stuff. I think for me, or maybe Harith. Harith was memorable, but the arrest was memorable. But I thought the time, the probably Kanika, being at Kanika with that was the most impactful for me, because I followed it so closely. I was so involved with you guys at that moment, and over time, like the story has changed. So that's what I think. But the day you got arrested was pretty intense.
The most memorable for me would be the same. The most impactful one would be the Tyshawn Lee protest. And I remember the night before in the Kanika Jenkins protest, we were really drained and we were tired, and we were being bullied by the police. They wouldn't allow us to do much of anything. We had been there for some days, and it was kind of weighing on us. And I just remember going to my phone and just seeing all of these messages of people saying, I bought a plane ticket. Where's the best place to stay? Will there be jail support tomorrow? Will there be snacks? And it was literally so many messages to the point where I didn't know what happened. Like, did somebody create a flyer or something? But I will never forget getting on my Facebook Live and saying, if there ever was a day, because it was a hard protest, it was a hard day. Like I said, the police were completely uncooperative with us because they had us outnumbered. I said, if there ever was a day for you to come out here and protest, you want to be out here tomorrow. People are coming from everywhere. And I literally did it because I never seen so many messages. And the very next day that we returned to protest in Rosemont, literally 1,200 people from everywhere had showed up. And it was like, now try to bully us. We're marching onward, and it was pure chaos. And it was out of control, but it was so amazingly and impactful. I mean, memorable. But the most impactful one was when it was a group of about 12. We had just got done protesting for Tyshawn Lee, but it was a group of about 12 individuals. When the protest was over, that going through the neighborhood saying stop the violence. Well, we literally went door to door, and we knocked on people's doors, asking them if they seen anything or heard anything or wanted to tell us anything. And we had people who were so afraid, but they chose, because it was a child who was killed, to give us information, and we were able to get the information about who killed Tyshawn Lee from the neighborhood and worked with the police to bring the capture. And that was the most impactful.
Wow. I wasn't at that one, but I can say Tyshawn Lee played a huge. Oh, man, Tyshawn was a 9-year-old kid who was lured into an alley and murdered by a rival gang to his father. And it shook a lot of people in Chicago because of the brutal, and I think he was tortured before he was killed, and it just shook us. And that's what got Alita activated. Actually, it's funny because each person is activated for a different reason. In the film, like if you had Alita got activated because her mom had just died, and then she saw Tyshawn get murdered, and she said, I can't be the person who just sits around and says, oh, how terrible it is, and not do anything. And she started to do stuff. And you know, she's still doing stuff, and then doing a lot of work. And you know, Will got activated around Laquan, and you know, Lamont got activated, frankly, around India. And so you can, I don't know how you got involved, Jed, what your first story was, but I know those three, what they say is really what got them going. But that's interesting because I never really talked to you about what your first, what got you into it. You know, you seem to be just get into it. I don't know. Well, why did you get into it? I mean, why? Yeah, because I just saw you already in it, you know?
Yeah, I was always a vocal individual all my life. But what made me active in Chicago, I don't know the young man's name, but I know he's 14 because the police officer told me, and I asked him, did he die? And they said yes. But this young man was shot in my neighborhood on my way to the store. And I literally saw people stepping over his body to go into the Family Dollar that was literally literally a couple feet away from him. They literally stepped over a dying or at that young body of a teenage boy to go into the store to finish their shopping. And I'll never forget the police coming and roping it off, people stuck in the store, and they got his body up and moved him. And once they removed him, the neighborhood literally went right back to normal as if there was never a body there.
Yeah.
And I literally stood there the whole time. And people then came out of the store with their stuff. There was no gathering. The gathering was there while the police tape was there, but they got their stuff and they left. And I was like, how could you continue to shop knowing there's a child shot outside the door? And so after that, I went to the alderman's office to try and talk to her about what was going on and what I'd seen. And what made my first action in Chicago specifically was when Magic Johnson, right after that, tried to open the alternative school in the neighborhood. And the alderman said she didn't want it because she didn't want the bad children in the neighborhood going into breaking houses in Jackson Park area of the neighborhood. And after that, I don't know, I became very vocal. Both the young boy dying and the school being rejected, both has interviews of me in the media, and I never stopped since then. I just kept going, and I looked up, and it was years later.
Yeah, that's deep. It's deep, man. It's just, yeah. We that's crazy, man. And I think everybody had something like that where it's just a moment that you just say, I don't know, they just got involved, and I think that's what's so cool about, it's terrible, but it's so cool about the film being able to communicate that, is that people can take that lesson, that whether it's a school closing or whether it's this or that, in their own community, they may not have a high level of violence in the neighborhood, but you know, my mom, shout out to my mom, man. She was always organizing. And, you know, one time in 8th grade, something was going on. She used my name. She said, she wrote a letter to all the parents because we were doing something. She was like, Little Johnny, you know, and of course I got ridiculed terribly for it, but she was always organizing the parents and people in the neighborhood helping out, you know, to just help out with people who needed things and talking to people. You know, my mom talked to everybody, and she talks to everybody. You know, so these guys are familiar, you know, characters.
Yeah.
You know,
Always involved in the community.
Yeah, always talking and communicating. You know.
So I think we have time for one more question, and that's going to be, what do you guys both think will be happening in the next 10 years for this community? Where are we leading to?
Man.
Only easy questions for you guys, clearly.
Yeah. For America,
the next
or for
10 years, and what's going to happen in this community, is I think that looking at what is taking place, I really feel like we have it's kind of strange because we have a lot of problems, but we have a lot of new voices and a lot of new advocates that have come up. And I think that this is the best way I can explain, and I hope it makes sense. I feel like we got a new opportunity for a fresh start. I think that the country has selected a new leader. And I think that people are aware of many issues and social justices and inequalities that are going on. And it's just like I said earlier, I believe that in the next 10 years, we're going to either have people break beyond the barriers of their limitations and become advocating residents, or we're going to go back to sleep because we think we've accomplished something. And these issues that have been unresolved will become cancers that'll grow. So we'll either build community or we'll be preparing ourselves for the next 10 years of repeated history because we didn't learn from our mistakes and our past. And I think that it literally is on us. And that is why this film is important to me, because I feel that it may make people aware that there's other stories behind the headlines and even maybe see themselves and maybe we'll move. And maybe before I leave this earth, we may find a path to why my story is Jon's story, why Jon's story is my story, and our story is your story. And how when we all choose to not ignore those stories in this bigger sense, we could actually create a better world. And that's what I hope I'll see.
Yeah, man. Well, that about sums it up, man. I like that. That's true. That's true. It's up to us, man.
Yeah. So I think that is going to be it for the discussion. Thank you guys so much, both of you, for joining me for this and for being part of, this exhibition and for allowing us to present your work in this way. If you're interested in supporting the project as well, like I mentioned, you're able to purchase the works on the top floor and also donate to a GoFundMe, which is linked in the exhibition as well. But yeah, I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who's with us tonight. And please feel free to visit the exhibition when you can. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.